Greetings and salutations, friends and listeners, and welcome to part 2 of my previously recorded in real time reaction commentary to Thursday, October 22nd's final presidential debate.
And that's the real problem. The real problem that very few people are addressing because they're busy fighting about whether or not masks are effective risk reduction measures or whether or not COVID-19 even really exists. And tragically, presuming that I'm not completely wrong, and this is a real virus, and what's corrupt and morally reprehensible is the shenanigans on both sides of the echo chamber of echo chambers that have created and driven wedge issues to keep people distracted. We could end all this now in 14 to 30 days from today if we just did 80 to 90% participation in a serious snapping of the transmission chain. That takes discipline and dedication, and everyone's burnt out. Or really hunkered down and ready for a long haul. One of the two. I was willfully unprepared for this live, real-time capturing of my thoughts for the discussion because I don't have tea ready, and my voice is already faltering. I'm going to let it roll and run down and set up some tea, but also keep an ear on what they're talking about. And be back with some more reactionary comments and critiques and hopefully laughs and giggles in just a bit. Trump has made a second reference to the military and a specific general in charge of logistics. He has not overtly said anything about the military being used for it to be mandatorily, like mandated a distribution, right? And anti-vaxxers and all them freedom talkers really hate it when something is mandatory. And I can't disagree with them on that, especially if it's not a really well-designed thing. So that's ominous, but not scary. But consider what Trump has already been willing to do and get away with.
And frankly,
with his military, right? With the military that he has at his disposal, which is not his. And thank God there's also an overt, open, public, and growing movement of military personnel, both current and past, that say that they will remain impartial and that they're not going to just blindly obey bad commands from the commander-in-chief. Here's a bit of interesting Trumptopian comedy. Amongst the anti... Oh, it keeps wanting to play out. It doesn't want to pause anymore. Amongst anti-Trump type people who post stuff on the internet, there are memes claiming that H1N1 was way more deadly than COVID-19. But we didn't go crazy and wear masks and shut everything down back then. Trump just said that H1N1 was a total disaster, but way less deadly than COVID-19. So that's confusing. And I don't know which is not the truth and which is the exaggerated bullshit. But one of those two is not like the other. I appreciate that Biden got in a jab about the golf course abuse, because Trump and those of his ilk were outraged if Obama went golfing. And Trump literally swore he would not golf at all. And he has spent a lot of time and a lot of tax money going to his own, and this is sort of important, his own golf course, where the government has paid his business our tax money, which he will end up pocketing himself, which, to the best of my understanding, is blatantly illegal and categorically un-American. Or the most American thing besides apple pie. One of the two, I can't tell.
A lot of that meeting, not from his
Hold on.
administration.
Also, I wanted to point out that he just did another instance of that brilliant merging of things that are not false with total cockamamie. He was just talking about, again, not really talking about future plans, but his own response, and how he's trying to make Fauci the bad guy that said not to wear masks, as if Trump has always said wear masks and supported mask wearing, which he has not. That's one of those things that makes him, I don't know, he garners power by leading people to just agree with his upside down interpretation of things. I don't know if it's comedy or karma, but we've come to a moment of full circleness. The next question, which opened at Joe Biden, included some breaking news. Sorry, my pause doesn't want to stick for some reason, because I paused it a lot because I rambled for quite a bit. But the host included a reference to some breaking news from overnight of federal government security agencies confirming that both Russia and Iran are trying to play hanky-panky with the American voters. I think that the whole hack the election phrase gets bandied about and misapplied, right? Like, I don't think they're literally trying to tweak the numbers. I think they're just trying to socially hack the electoral process. But I digress. I wonder how Trump will respond, and how heavy will he lean on the Russia, it's just a hoax in Russia, narrative. So Trump didn't want to answer the next iteration of the, question he was going to get asked. He wanted to tackle the first question that Biden just answered about corruption. And Biden's answer was a strong, solid, centrist, anybody's going to mess with our sovereignty is going to have to pay a price. Exactly what you would expect. That is a proper, I'm not a statist, but holy shitballs, do I also sort of think that is the proper statement from the president of the United States, because there is a federalist state government system, and they've got to have a position and a stance. Trump has long been infamous on pausing. He's and I don't know if it's true or not, and maybe Biden does also get money from Russia. Hello, Panama Papers. Lots of people get money from Russia. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, look up the Panama Papers. It made a splash in the news and it disappeared. But it's all about money from Russia going to, guess what? Politicians. Guess where? Everywhere. But he's trying to play the schoolyard, I made out of rubber and whatever you say bounces off me and sticks on you. Which is a silly way of saying he bemoans too much. Every time he gets zinged with something that it feels like he might actually be guilty of, he projects it onto his opposition. I'm not a puppet, you're a puppet. No, you're a puppet. And it's an easy game to play because they're both puppets, right? So, I mean, that was my commentary back then when that moment happened. And what a glorious moment that was when Hillary Clinton called Donald J. Trump a puppet and Donald J. Trump called Hillary Clinton a puppet. And then somebody put out there a photo of two puppet forms of them shaking hands because that's closer to the truth than anything. So he's going to do that right now with Biden and the claim that Biden got $3 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife. And I haven't had time to look that up to see if it's really true or not. But I wouldn't be surprised if it is. But that has nothing to do in terms of defending your own track record with clearing your name. That doesn't clear your name. And he just said something that I know for a fact he himself has contradicted in the past. He just said he's getting no money from Russia. But I saw him say, and I saw his two kids say, that he doesn't worry about banks in America because they get so much money from Russia. That was way back in 2016. All right.
Oh, I said, what did I pay?
So, critically speaking, the flaw with Trump's approach is that he has not discussed a single word of solid policy. So instead of anchoring himself in policy and solutions, he vaguely references stuff and then attacks with unproven, unverified, and often questionable talking points that he's harvested from the alt-right because he watches Fox News obsessively. And it falls flat because he's always going to sound like a blowhard that doesn't actually have a plan. And that's generally, unfortunately, and this is independent of Trump, that's generally the biggest critical flaw of the entire GOP as a political party and what their apparent strategy for the last 15 years has been. To be a bully and a thug and to repeal without having a plan to replace. They just want to tear down that which the Democratic Party builds. In and of itself is sort of meaningless, especially when it is not good for the greater whole of the community. Does that mean that I inherently think that all democratic solutions are perfect? Of course not. Was Obamacare perfect? Of course not. It was based on Romneycare. It was ridiculously flawed and had a lot of shortcomings and still doesn't give health care to the poorest of the poor, which is what Jesus would do for free. He wouldn't give them health insurance for free. He would cure them for free. If we're going to get all nitpicky about Jesus and what he would or would not do, let's be really clear about that. He would not pit his followers against each other the way Trump does. He would not create the ideological political infighting between one party and the other the way our culture, our political culture does. And he would not deny healing to anyone. Never mind healthcare coverage. He wouldn't even fuck about with healthcare coverage. We would not be having a discussion about health insurance and those related industries. He would be healing people. Let's not forget that, right? Okay. Let us return to their much more civilized poking and jabbing at each other. So the next series of back and forth has been about North Korea. And, I guess vis-a-vis how to relate to China and how to deal with North Korea because they're interrelated. My DVR is jumping around. It doesn't like pausing for long periods of time. So when it's paused, it'll start playing, interrupting or making noise on the recording. And when I push play, it'll jump ahead in the middle of I got to hiccup and catch up with a little bit. But I think it's ironic, just to touch on the whole, the general issue of North Korea. Biden's approach is, categorically speaking, what American policy for North Korea has been, and both parties have agreed should be about, generally speaking. And I don't see why anybody would find it offensive. I really don't. Trump's relationship with Korea is ridiculous. They have literally exchanged man-bro love letters, and he has expressed way too much idolatry, Trump has, towards Kim Jong-un, whatever his name is. And that's just that. And that alone is like, why are the Trump supporters so welcoming of his bizarre attachments to people who actually are tyrants? How does the Trump base maintain their supposed, freedom from all tyranny position when their hero and chosen neophyte of a political puppet, that was not the right label, but not the right words all put together, but that their, demagogue is a worshiper of other tyrants? How do you reconcile those two things? Freedom from tyranny and worshiping of tyrants. I don't know how you do it, folks, but you make interesting mental gymnastic brain pretzels out of yourselves, and it's comical to watch. He keeps repeating this, because they're now on to healthcare. The DVR skipped ahead a bit. It's getting impatient with my coverage. He's talking about, Trump is rambling about his healthcare and his meandering through his relationship and opinion to Obamacare, about how he tried to repeal it and tried to get rid of the mandate because it's the worst part, and how it's not really Obamacare anymore because he's totally damaged it, but he's going to run it well, even though if you try to run it well, it doesn't run well, and how he then just repeats over and over again that they're going to, at some point, somehow, magically, without a plan, without an infrastructure, without a written bill, provide us with a better health care. I'm sure he would love for it to be called Trump care. And he's already sort of done that, right? He gave himself a huge victory lap for carving out the individual mandate originally. And when he did that, it was quite ridiculous and funny. And I don't know. He's just so full of hyperbole and nonsense. And quite frankly, the strongest, clearest, most real, legitimate critique is, where's the plan, Donald Trump? There isn't one. He cannot point to a 20-point plan on his website. He cannot produce... Remember that time he paraded, he did the visual staging of a bunch of files with papers in them? He doesn't actually have documents, I don't believe. There's no evidence anywhere that I've come across as of yet that indicates that Donald Trump or the Republican Party have a viable, real, actually well-written out replacement plan. And that's insane. And also the thing I just said about Jesus, right? And they are really great at pretending to be the party of Jesus. And if Jesus showed up today, he'd be like, the fuck are you doing with this shenanigans with healthcare and abusing people with shitty healthcare? Why aren't you just healing them for free like I taught you? Sorry, not sorry. if we're going to get down to brass tacks and talk about Jesus, even though this is supposed to be a separation of church and state, I've got some really strong opinions on that department that got nothing to do with nothing other than what Jesus would have actually done. But that's not part of the debate. So I digress. Returning to their discussion for further commentary. Conversely, whether it was Obamacare or any other attempt at reforming the medical industry and the insurance industry, the Democrats have always sat squarely on the statement that they believe in affordable health care being a human right. That everyone has the right to affordable health care provider options and affordable health insurance. And I mean, that sounds reasonable and great, but it's also a big, whopping, ridiculous flaw in as much as that the Democrats pretend to be Jesus-loving, Christians who understand what Jesus taught also. And they totally don't, in my opinion, get what Jesus was actually teaching. I mean, many of them probably do. But systematically speaking, in terms of how they operate as members of the civic realm, we're not really healing everyone for free like Jesus taught us, which is what Jesus did.
The way you're handling this, I have to say.
It should be obvious that he is a con artist, par non excellence, to butcher a French term, when he keeps putting things out there in absolutist terms and saying that if Biden wins, the whole country will implode. Sorry. And this has been a scare tactic, right? Artfully turned into double reverse psychology by Fox News. The right vilifies to an absurd degree what the left wants to do. Whenever, the right has any power and tries to maintain that power over people by keeping them afraid, mindlessly, irrationally afraid of what the left wants to do. Is the left free of corruption? Absolutely not. Is the left a socialist devil that wants to rape us all and kill us all? Of course not. Neither are the Republicans. The problem is both parties are so wound up in the tribalistic us versus them, you are evil and we are good, thinking that everyone acts like a fucking jerk and ends up falling into ego traps of conflict and violence. And that's where we're at. That's what 2020 is about. If there is a nexus of the confluence of all things, it's that right there, in my humble opinion. So they're debating about healthcare, and I've said what I got to say about healthcare. And I don't think that's magical thinking. I mean, this is a country that pretends to believe in Jesus. Why aren't we actually exploring the esoteric teachings of Jesus that have everything to do with healing people with divine powers? I don't mean faith healers in the sort of, I'm just going to touch you on the forehead and scream gobbledygook at you. I mean the actual science of metaphysical alchemy, if there is such a thing. If Jesus was teaching us something that actually works. Or we should just stop pretending that we believe in a religious system that has no real content that actually works. We need to fucking sort that out and get it over with. That's a whole other issue of a whole other paradox. Coming back to the debate, and what my point is, it's like they both have their flaws, and their flaws mirror each other. And it's kind of hilarious that, they play with opposing themes of red and blue. One is the red party, the other is the blue party. Both of them use red, white, and blue, and they use it in a way that looks opposite, just to be contentious. And instead of fighting about healthcare and health insurance, we could be actually healing people and actually preventing disease. But that gets ridiculed and marked and vilified and marginalized and dismissed because everyone's busy arguing about which political ideology is most righteous. When we could just be uniting to actually implement solutions like preventative medicine, preventative healthcare. And instead of fighting about whether or not it is socialized or not, let's realize America already socialized a lot of things for the greater good, and realize that technically speaking, we claim to believe in Jesus, and by modern terms, he might qualify as a socialist. So why do we hate socialism? Why is it an evil boogeyman? Don't understand. And also, why must it be an industry that profits, right? Like, the Democratic point of view is that everyone has the right to be profited on. That's what it translates into. Once you kind of take off the rosy-colored glasses. Oh, so when I get sick, I have the right to be able to afford you profiteering on me instead of just preventing me getting sick. That's the problem. That's the real problem, and therein lies the real set of solutions, none of which ever gets discussed at any of these kinds of political debates. They sparred over raising the minimum wage. I used to support that, and then I was reacquainted with the idea of a universal living wage, thanks to Andrew Yang. Shame he's still, that he's out, but it's a good thing he's still trying to be an active participant in political discourse, because he had some cool ideas. And I'm now very much in favor of a universal living wage. I know that puts me way over there in like evil, dangerous socialist territory. But I'm coming from the perspective that I understand that economies, money itself, the entire work for pay construct is totally made up. And since we totally made it up, and it's imaginary and not a natural law of the universe, then we can totally reimagine it so that it's entry-level investment universal pay for those who don't have a lot of wealth. And then once you build something that sells a lot and you build a lot of wealth, then you no longer need that investment basic survival income, because you were able to survive, get your fundamental needs of safety, security, food, housing, and stuff met, and then invest in your entrepreneurship. If we did that instead of this bootstrap yourself, rags to riches from out of poverty crapshoot, more people would be more successful. Is that too crazy sounding? The argument against it is, of course, completely reliant on the objectification, the stupidification, and the vilification of all those lazy masses that would never be able to take that investment money and turn themselves into a thriving business, which relies on a really ignorant assumption about everyone else around you, with that everybody except you is lazy, as if you've never been lazy in your life. And no, I don't think that if we provided for each other as a civic, organizational, community organizing endeavor through a sort of system of investment in young people and in those who don't have inherited resources, inherited assets, inherited businesses, we could lift everyone out of poverty and build a whole new level of middle class and upper class wealth, and provide for future generations of new people that don't come prepackaged with wealth. Not so crazy, I don't think, but doesn't fit in the duopoly paradigm because the duopoly paradigm isn't about fixing things. It's about keeping everybody arguing with each other so that you don't notice how both sides are attached to one another. Now they're jousting about immigration and asylum seekers, etc. Here I, again, stand in a nuanced position that doesn't fit cozily in between these two echo chambers. Therefore, both echo chambers think I'm crazy. But no one can be illegal on stolen land. This country has a deep, dark heritage of having been founded on territory disgracefully taken from those who were naturally here before. And so essentially, one of the most sort of ridiculous character flaws, if I may be this critical, and I have in the past, and I will again in the future, I'm sure, without ever abandoning my love for this country, but this country is literally this hypocritical. We are, you are, they are, we all are a nation of immigrants that is addicted to hating on immigrants. We got to get over that. It's nonsense. It's complete bullshit. And tragically, although the Democrats try to be on the right side of that issue, they don't go far enough. You know, Obama was officially the deporter in chief, and, you know, they did things that didn't really help. That maybe sounded like they might be helpful, but really weren't so much. And the Republicans are just about hating them, which, again, not very Christ-like, yo. In this America that pretends to love Jesus so much, why does the party that wraps itself up in the cross the most act the least un-Christ-like? So we're going to talk about immigration reform, and immigrants. It's like, I get a little old school and go, you know, biblical and be like, don't hate the immigrant because you were once a stranger too, bro. That's what it says in the Bible. And what God and what Jesus want us to do is take care of people who come here and help them become integrated members of the community. Not bully them, not objectify them, not vilify them and make them bogeymen, not treat them poorly, not abuse them, not incarcerate them and torture them and separate them and keep them tucked in, you know, under the rocks and crannies of society. And I think both parties need to radically alter their point of view. Now, the blue party is all about inclusion, and that's awesome. But they still, you know, need to step it up a bit, I think. And the red party's just got to wake up to their hypocrisy and get over themselves, quite frankly.
Got the death penalty. None of them were.
Now they're sparring about race, which is so far not a lot of fresh content. They've already made their arguments on this case, both of them and their surrogates, for the last year and a half. So back to a mode of sort of just rinse and repeat and rephrase and keep saying the same things again from both guys. Trump saying that, no other American president has done so much for the black community, which I find simultaneously laughable and also, like, ironically believable. Like, he might have, ironically, really have done more different, like a collection of more different things than many other presidents. But also, like, I don't know, I've heard that said, and then I keep hearing prison reform, and then I keep seeing that the prison industrial state complex is not very different from what it was before Trump got into office. And while, you gotta applaud and give credit where credit is due, I'm out. The jury's out on whether or not that statement is true, half true, or not. But frankly, and this is a thorny issue. It's a deep-seated, thorny issue, and the problem is bigger than Trump. Trump is not the source, not the originator, and he is not the person capable of fixing the problem. But systemic racial bias, systemic racial discrimination, and individual, personal, one-on-one racism is alive and well in this country. And to pretend that it is not is to be complacent and complicit with the endeavors of all those who are actively working on a racist agenda. And to speak out about it and to try to inspire others to take a stand as an anti-racist is not some sort of horrible, evil, socialist indoctrination program. It's the right thing to do. Plain and simple. And I've got all kinds of reasons for having come to that conclusion, and we could spend an episode or two talking about them at some point. But I'm going to pause it here for a little break and then return to some more of their discussion. Trump loves to say over and over again in that like word magic-y, neuro-linguistic programming kind of way, I'm the least racist person ever. I'm the least racist person in the room. I'm the least racist person that's ever been president. And touting the things that he's done to support the African-American communities of America. And while I can't detract from the real things that might actually be beneficial, I also cannot let it slide by. It must be called out that Trump is most definitely the kind of person that defends himself against accusations of racism instead of ever conceding any guilt in that department, and also simultaneously indulges in embracing and openly welcoming the support of overt racists in America. As one meme very poignantly pointed out recently, if I remember the caption correctly, it was a photo of a Trump supporter amongst a group of Trump supporters, all of them with various banners and flags and whatnot. But this one particular individual was holding up a giant red and white flag with a swastika on it, and and it said Trump, Pence. I don't remember if it had a year or not. It may not. It might have just said Trump and Pence above and below the swastika. And the caption to the meme was, quote, I'm not saying he's a racist, but it looks like the racists think he's a racist. And that's a problem, folks. You can't just turn a blind eye and tolerate that, because he's cultivating their support. Those are the people who are strapping up in order to stand back and stand by. Although he technically said that to a different group. But like the portions of the base that are increasingly objectionably ideologically driven with ideologies that contain a lot of animosity, conflict, and hate towards others purely for ideological reasons, they're the ones who think he wants them to literally form an army to defend his empire. And, bless their hearts, in their defense, Trump Jr. has basically put that call out there in not quite as many words, right? Not quite the same phrasing as I just used. And, well, that's problematic, to say the least. But we'll put a pin in all that for now.
In the process.
It's a shame the audience isn't allowed to respond, because that was like a knockout punch response. Trump is trying to corner Biden into this area of, you say you're going to, and I'm paraphrasing here, Trump's words. You just said you're going to do this and you're going to do that and you're going to do the other thing. Why didn't you do it in the 8 years you were with Obama? And anyone who actually paid attention from a nonpartisan point of view knows that the flaws of the Obama-Biden administration not achieving enough rest entirely at the feet of the obstructionist AF Republican-controlled Congress, who overtly swore at the very beginning of the Obama administration that they would kill every effort brought forth by Democrats and not allow this administration to achieve a goddamn thing. So if you're going to like point a finger, wag a finger at Biden, I mean, not that I'm a big supporter. I don't think he's the best human being on the planet. I don't think he's the best politician on the planet. But he's the guy that is going to win the blue party. That's where we're at. But if you're going to wag a finger at him as the previous administration and say, look at all these things you didn't do or you should have gotten done back then, you can't pretend that the Democratic Party didn't overtly, publicly, adamantly, and with all kinds of blatant grotesqueness block every effort at every angle about everything, even cool shit that they technically should have supported. Because that's what they did. Now they're stabbing at each other about climate change and the Paris Accord. I don't know how much I've lost, because every time I pause and start it back up again, the DVR jumps. I might be intrigued enough to give the whole debate a second viewing, but I might not. But on this theme, see, the tough part with me, folks, and I thank you guys for your endless patience listening to my rambunctiously rambling episodes. But my problem is that I'm neither one nor the other, right? And that I think we can make better choices that utilize tools from either end of the spectrum, but not the corruption inherent in both parties and the current default setup. And when it comes to things like climate change, I am in the unusual... Hold on, it keeps doing that thing. I'm in the unusual position of disagreeing with either or, right? It's a little bit like I've said this before in the show, and I'll say it again. The globist model of the Earth is categorically wrong. That does not mean the flat Earth model is right. The flat Earth model of the Earth is categorically wrong. That does not automatically mean I think the world is a globe. The world is a living creature with her own sentience. And this part of it that we inhabit is her womb. Her cosmic uterus, for shit's sake. Therefore, I cannot agree or support or tolerate either model, especially as it clouds our ability to comprehend our mother and the womb we live inside of. Right? So the same thing with climate change. I can't endorse the Republican attitude about it, and I can't really support the Democratic attitude about it, because both inherently objectify Mother Nature, treat her like commodifiable inanimate objects, and even if one side admits that climate change is happening, they don't understand that part of our responsibility is to be stewards to the planet in the organic sense, which is a practice and a trade and an art and a craft and a whole spectrum of spirituality that we gave up on ages ago when we adopted this convenience-based model of society. And that if we really want to get right with Mother Nature, we really need to deal with everything about our toxic model of society instead of arguing about whether or not climate change is real. Instead of arguing about whether this stupid model or that stupid model of the wrong thing is useful, we should be getting right with Mother Earth. That is the solution to our problem. And to get right with Mother Earth means doing challenging things to this imaginary system of systems that we dreamt up. And the first step, I think, is acknowledging that we made it up and that we can change it. It's difficult for me, like, okay, all politicians are suspect and dubious, but any politician that says absolutistly whatever the other side does, it will destroy this country, is laughable on its face. That's ignorance-dependent fear-mongering. And it's an insult to his own base. He's trolling them. And that's the part that I don't... Like, I wouldn't tolerate that. I tried to sort of theoretically give Donald Trump a chance way back in the very, very beginning. But his own words and actions proved my theory to me right about how he behaves and how he operates. And I had to withdraw from trying to give him a fair play chance because he doesn't approach any of this from a fair play point of view. But I digress. My biggest beef with the whole system is they keep us arguing about all the wrong things. And that's what's showcased at these debates. Huge question was just asked. I hope I don't miss the answer. But the oil industry is toxic. People who live near oil industries get sick. And Trump just deregulated the oil industry. Why should anyone support you after that if it's going to kill them? Let's see what he says.
The families that we're talking about are employed heavily, and they're making a lot of money, more money than they've ever made. If you look at the kind he lives, I have not heard the numbers or the statistics.
Oh, that was still rolling. It's sketchy because it jumped around a bit, but he's doing a Trump magic noodle answer of the people that are poor are making the most money from the industry that's killing them, which makes no sense. And I don't know about you, but if I worked for an industry that was slowly killing me and everyone around it, I don't know that I'd be really super geniusly proud about keeping that industry alive. That's my beef. No offense to all those who relied upon these jobs, especially in a sort of generational sense. But coal workers, miners, and oil drillers, it's like, hello, I get it, it's your job, but you work at a place that kills people. Maybe get a different job and not attach yourself to it. So psychologically that it's a personal attack on you to say that this industry is toxic. Because I'm not trying to attack anybody. I'm just saying what that industry does is toxic. Either make it so that you can do all the same things without being toxic, or make it a new industry. I don't see why we're busying ourselves arguing about other aspects of it. It's at that level, right? Oil is death. And I don't think that's a radical socialist thing to say. It's a scientific fact. Try breathing car exhaust fumes. That's legitimately a traditional form of suicide. To lock yourself in your own car and run a fucking, one of those fucking exhaust hoses, literally called an exhaust hose. Why is that? Because you need to funnel those fumes away from inside the house. Well, if you fucking blow your own brains out sucking down exhaust fumes, running a hose from your tailpipe into your car. Guess what, folks? For every mile you drive, you've contributed, no offense, I've done a lot of driving, and I'm as guilty as anybody else. But for every mile we are forced to drive using fossil fuels, it's us chugging down those toxic fumes in our own finite, closed chamber system. Those fumes don't just magically disappear. Pollution doesn't magically go away. And it doesn't just kill us, it's impacting everything that is life on this earth. And we can't just keep pretending that it's not and turning a blind eye. Well, that ended predictably. The final question, and I think I lost a lot of airtime. There was a lot of gaps where the DVR jumped forward for whatever technical memory buffering problem issues it was having on my DVR system. But so I feel bad if I missed any winning moments that deserve commentary. I'm sure I'll figure it out, because if I see anything stand out that was really bizarre that I don't remember seeing and or discussing in the next 3 days, I'll make sure to address it in a future segment. But the final question that was asked of both candidates was, what will you say to American voters in your acceptance speech? What would you say to the American voters who did not vote for you in your acceptance speech? Trump, an incoherent, rambling attempt to throw more shade at Biden, which makes no sense. Because why would you say that if you're winning? Why would you keep peddling fear-mongering about your opponent if you've won? Right? So, like, it made no sense that he included that. And none of how I understood his answer made any sense in regards to addressing the vast numbers of people who voted against you. Biden's answer was a delightful, perfectly politically correct blue answer of, we are the United States, I will represent you even though you didn't vote for me, and we will find new hope together and move forward and invest in all this wonderful opportunity. Pretty standard stuff. My final thought and takeaway before the rest of the talking heads start pumping out their questions and their ideas, and before I've been influenced by that, is simple. I want to hear from the Trump base that has hit the wall of, okay, I can't tolerate this anymore with him, and ask them about these points, like, what was it, especially if tonight, because I'm hoping that tonight Trump was sufficiently not Trumpian enough for the hardcore Trumpeteers who really want Trumptopia to be the true nature of this country. And I hope that a bunch of his supporters walked away disillusioned and ready to maybe vote elsewhere. And ultimately, I think Trump will get a lot of commentary in reaction to the fact that he was the most polite and most civil and most disciplined that we've ever seen him on a political stage. Excuse me. And Biden was coherent and not, with the exception of obviously working through some of his perfectly understandable and not to be made fun of or ridiculed, occasional stuttering, which, if you really think about it, most people would have that sort of handicap in public speaking. He spoke really well. And if we're going to judge how the candidates spoke, Biden spoke like a, quote, old-time normal American. He could have been a Republican. Because, honestly, compared to Donald Trump, Ronald Reagan sounds like a Democrat. Jesus sounds like a Democrat. Compared to Donald Trump and the direction that the GOP has been going in from before they struck their little deal with the Orange Devil, they're going so far to their own right that their own heroes could be rationally put in the Democratic Party now, and they would react negatively to anyone, being that kind of Republican. They do react negatively to anyone being a Republican that's not to the right enough. Obviously, we are approaching a momentous and emotionally charged moment in historical activity. We are, that was a weird phrasing. We are approaching what will be a historical moment. The final accredited and accepted result of this election process that we find ourselves in the middle of now And of course that day, November 3rd, although those two things may not happen on the same calendar day necessarily, it's going to be a historic moment. From November 3rd until the final results are announced, it's going to be critical and transitional, I think, for the nation. And as I was pontificating about earlier in a previous episode, despite all the things I could be busy criticizing Biden about, and Harris for that matter, I prefer that they win so that we can get through the shock and reaction from the Trumpopian portion of our fellowship processed, right? Get that grieving sorted out. Get that letting go of Trump engaged in. And so that we can manifest collectively a traditional, peaceful transition of power on January, 20th? Because we sure as hell don't need a misguided, mismanaged, and misaligned attempt at a civil war over any of this nonsense. In large part because it won't solve a goddamn thing, and it'll just cost us even more lives than we're already losing. And it's infinitely preventable. Everyone just needs to mellow the fuck out, smoke a doobie or two, and put the guns away in the gun locker and stop masturbating to them. And stop being, susceptible, stop being complicit in the fomenting of violence on the streets of America. Like, I don't care the rationalization, folks. I don't care which party you're going to blame it on, folks. Fomenting, encouraging, striving towards, wanting, and mentally masturbating about violence on the streets of America is a categorically un-American thing to do. Not to mention, I think, illegal. And I do not condone it. I do not endorse it. I do not tolerate it. And I do not indulge in it. What America needs is healing. It needs good old-fashioned American healing, which is its own mojo. Then it needs political, transcendental healing of the nature that transcends politics and culture. And it needs true esoteric spiritual healing, as does the rest of the human species. And tragically, neither party had anything to say about that ever, did they? No. That's why if you need a really anchor, linchpin, bottom of the barrel answer, that's my baseline. Neither party acknowledges that concern, and it's my primary concern. Therefore, I'm not going to waste my time endorsing either party. I'm only going to criticize them and critique them for their flaws, because those flaws work against my primary concern. And for those of you who are not clear, welcome to the deeply nested, but also sort of right there in front of you, painfully obvious secret, not secret, open secret of this show and my worldview and the art I generally fail at making. And that's that my primary concern in the world is not political, it is not ideological, it is not religious, it is not cultural, it is spiritual. It can be phrased in the following sentence: species-wide, third eye opening, transformationally healing, esoteric enlightenment. That's my primary concern, my primary wish for all others in the human species, and the thing I think we have tricked ourselves into ignoring. And by having done so, by having tricked ourselves into ignoring that, we allow all of this other shenanigans and malarkey take precedence and run the show. Imagine if we flip that inside out and on its head. Imagine if species-wide, third eye opening, transformationally, spiritually healing, esoteric awakening was what we all concerned ourselves with and rooted our civic organization around. Why would that be a horrible thing to focus on? Healing everybody of everything, emotional, intellectual, biological, genetic, like healing on all the spectrum wavelengths. How is that controversial? How is that disagreeable? How is that evil? I don't know. But I keep getting mocked and ridiculed and called all kinds of silly names for maintaining that as my primary concern. And yet, all the name calling, all the ridiculing I have endured, I have earnestly always questioned my position and returned to the same conclusion. Especially after 40 years of questioning and revisiting, all the things that led me to this conclusion. I continue to return to the conclusion and recommit myself to it. The primary concern of perpetuating, mainstreaming, trendifying, making popular the notion that what we really should all be uniting around is species-wide healing. Species-wide healing that we, according to all the ancient chosen ones like Jesus and Buddha and Krishna, etc., we are capable of manifesting, but our ego and its constructs prevent us. It's that simple, folks. And from that, all my thinking evolves. So there you have it, friends. I'll leave you with that nugget to end this episode of my real-time reactionary comment audio blogging of the final Trump versus Biden, or Biden versus Trump presidential political debate. As always, friends, I humbly thank you for tuning in. I beg you to enjoy more episodes of my show, and humbly invite you to submit your questions, comments, suggestions, reactions to the social media platforms of this show so that I can reference them in future episodes. May peace, love, and grooviness be with you, and may 2021 be better, not worse, than 2020. Oh, and stay tuned, because I am totally going to do a special episode about the asteroid that may or not may be hitting us the day before the election. More episodes dropping soon. Lives Matter, and how supposedly the group is a hate group. And a black journalist was stating that according to them, according to the record, that as far as they were concerned, there was no evidence anywhere of Black Lives Matter openly and directly advocating in favor of reactionary violence against police officers. That others, and I've said this before, there are instigators on all sides, from all sides. So there's evidence that there have been instigators who have tried to, make that happen, create the appearance of a consensus around making a call for violence against police officers. And when, categorically, what Black Lives Matters as a movement, as a decentralized, grassroots, non-organization, what they're explicitly about is ending violence from police officers against black people. As one street sign meme clearly puts it, we're not trying to start a race war, we are trying to end one. And ultimately, I mean, the debate there is deeply flawed because the debate skirts around the depth of the very real, very complicated spiritual trauma that everyone carries forward because of all of our predecessors' egregious actions. Plenty of individualists and modernists say, well, I've never owned slaves, etc., etc., etc. And that's insufficiently anti-racist. And like I was saying earlier, to stand by, to turn a blind eye, to refuse to denounce, to refuse to be clear about one's position against white supremacy and or racism, etc., is to be complicit in it. Because this nation lives in the reverberating aftermath of this original sin of slavery. Now, it isn't the original slave of all humanity, and plenty of whataboutist diversionary tactics are about how people in other places, including black people, traded and enslaved their own people all throughout history. And that's just a mark of shame for all of you Bible thumpers, that you tolerate a religion that says not one negative prohibitive statement against slavery. That's got nothing to do with the facts and the legacy of how this nation was established. They are two separate problems. And to try to whataboutism your way around the legacy of systemic racial violence that was caused, perpetuated by an ongoing active what's the right word? Sort of an activism, an open activism by racist people for many years, and then the slow, torturous adjustment. We only redefined slavery. Now it's mass incarceration. We only denounced racism in its verbal forms and its most blunt, violent physical forms, but we did not actually address the root cause of that intellectual disease. To hate another human being because of their skin color is as ridiculous as hating another human being because of their imagination. And yet we live a legacy of a culture entrenched in that. Does that mean every white person's racist? Of course not. Conversely, all the fear mongering on the right and from those who do not denounce racism still wants all us in the middle who aren't racists, right, to be afraid of other races, especially black people, especially black men. Because why? Because they're evil and bad and prone towards criminal behavior. Why? Because we criminalized everything they did because they used to be slaves. And in order to control them, the ancestors, the slave owners, who were also powerful men in positions of control, criminalized everything they could that impacted only the slaves. And although we technically outlawed slavery and sort of rationally transformed it slowly over time into mass incarceration of black and brown people, we never really, truly, genuinely healed those who grew up with and or received the legacy of the culture of white supremacy and of segregationist thinking and of just us versus themist, whites versus blackist type thinking. We haven't healed that root spiritual trauma, which contextually in this country can be placed at its origin and the violence by immigrant white people against all the indigenous people that they found here and all the black people that they imported as tools and, treated as objects. That's very real. And it must really be contended with. And as, any kind of intellectual, spiritual, or cultural bypassing or political bypassing is just contributing to the toxicity of that problem and really genuinely needs to be addressed through healing. Not through yelling at each other, not through shooting each other in a civil war, not through hating each other and letting that boil over into outrageous acts of racialized violence, not by sitting around pretending that it's just a few bad apples and it'll all go away if we hope it will strong enough. Because while magic is real, magic requires action. Miracles are possible, but they still require your commitment, your willpower, your movement, your effort. And healing is a miraculous kind of magic, which requires our awareness, our mindfulness, our thoughtfulness, our concerted efforts, our conscious choices, our mindfulness, and our willingness to meet each other in the middle as brethren, as brothers and sisters in a singular family. That's what I say. That's what I got to say about that. Once again, I thank you, friends, for listening, and stay tuned for more.
Thank you.